Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're going to go over the goals of our build. It's important, I kind of know what I want, but let me explain to everybody what we're looking to build. So I've had this Miata for a long time, and usually what I've tried to do is kind of a bang for the buck build. So I would go buy, relatively cheap stuff. There's some expensive parts on the car, but generally speaking, I would buy the cheaper stuff and try to get as much performance and fun and value out of it as I could. And honestly, that's a pretty good way to build a car because you get a lot of enjoyment for your cash. So, for example, back in 2008, I built a motor. Now, granted, it was rods only, that's it, but that allowed me to run more boost. So I had a fast car, and back then you could buy a set of forged rods for 250 shipped off eBay, and they were fine. So I bought like a Mazda head gasket kit, and then I bought the $250 rods. And basically, by the time I bought the oil and the coolant, now I was buying cheap stuff, but by the time I was done, I only spent $500 in parts. And I had enough to put rods in my motor. So for, basically the cost of an engine that I already had, plus 500 bucks, and I now have a forged rods Miata motor, and I could run 17 to 20 pounds of boost on stock pistons and have a ton of fun. And that's how I rolled. I actually picked up a big turbo for cheap. It was brand new Garrett, but I got it secondhand, so got a good deal on that. And I just bought secondhand, some of this, like I bought a Flying Miata manifold, those are good, but I got it used, so I got a good deal on it. I built my own downpipe. Just kind of kept things cheap. I spent the money where I had to. Like when I bought hoses, I went and bought 12AN braided stainless hoses, name brand fittings, because I didn't want oil leaks. I cannot stand leaks. That's one thing I don't compromise on. So I spent some money in some places, but I cheaped out where I could. And then sometimes that bites you, and that's just part of it. So you really got to think about what are you trying to build when you get into your parts selection. If you're trying to build the I want to go set a record car, you can't really cut corners, and in fact, you're going to have to innovate in several areas so that you actually have a competitive advantage over the people you're trying to beat. Uh, I have a friend of mine that's working on doing that right now. I would have to discuss with him if he wants me to really go over any details of his project, but he's doing something similar where it's like a maximum effort build, and he's going for records, and he'll probably get them because he's not cutting any shortcut. He's not taking any shortcuts. But my build is not the same, so I'm trying to go for right now. This is going to be a 500 wheel horsepower build, so that's in the title. That's obvious. But what's not obvious is what I want this car to be. I want this to be something that I can drive and I can beat on and it won't break. And in fact, not only will it not break, but it doesn't even feel like it's going to break. So, you know how sometimes when you drive a car and it feels sketchy? I don't want this to feel sketchy. Now, this car at 300 feels solid. This is how it used to be. So at 300, it felt solid. At 400, it felt fast. And I was used to it. So to me, it didn't feel sketchy. Some passengers at 400 thought it felt sketchy, but I was used to it, so to me it really wasn't. 500 was very sketchy. It was all over the road, it was darting around. Yeah, it was very sketch. So I want this to be 500 and feel solid, where it's not scary to drive. And I want that mechanical reliability. I want all the cooling systems to not just, good enough, but I want them to be well designed. So, for example, I want to be able to go to the racetrack, make a pass, and look at my gauges, and they're basically just sitting where they were before. The coolant's not getting very hot, the oil's not getting very hot, my oil pressure looks good, the train, everything, just everything works as expected to where you don't really have to worry about it, and part of that, from an engineering perspective, is you got to have a factor of safety on stuff. So just making it work is not how you build something to be super reliable. You gotta put in the effort. So for example, one thing I used to skimp on was when I built brackets. I was trying to save weight, so I would make them out of thin sheet metal. And there was a point where I probably built several of these for the car, and over half of them are off the car now because they broke. So the one on the valve cover that holds the coil packs, amazingly, that is not broke, and it's right on the top of the valve cover. It vibrates like crazy, and somehow that one's held up. Go figure. But then all the ones that bolted to the intake manifold, with no exception, they're all broken. Uh, so now, like whenever I build new brackets, I make them thicker. I make them, I'm not trying to just add weight, but my goal is really about reliability. I don't want to fight this thing. So as I go through this build, you'll see When we start to go into hoses, for example, we'll spend a little extra money on the fittings, the hoses. We're going to try to do a better job than what we did before. We want things to look nicer, but we want to be able, when you see some types of hoses, like say you see AN hoses, you can kind of look at them and tell like, oh, that doesn't leak. It just looks nice. A lot of that stuff can hold 1,000 psi. So if I'm just running coolant through it or oil, you're not really stressing that hose. It's running at 5 or 10% of what it's capable of. So that'll last for years. And that's what we're looking for. We really want to build stuff so that I can put this on the car, shut the hood, and just beat on it. I want to be able to go to the racetrack where basically I just change the oil the night before, and then when it's time to go race, I just jump in, grab the keys, and go and have fun. And I don't have to worry about, is it smoking? Is there a leak? What's that noise I hear? None of that stuff. So we're really going for a reliable, enjoyable. To me, the enjoyable part is that it has to be reliable. So we're really going to be focusing on that. You'll see the drivetrain that's in the car now. That was kind of the beginnings of this philosophy. So I should do videos on this, but I broke like all kinds of transmissions, differentials, axles, things like that. And I finally got tired of it. I said, I didn't trust the car anymore. I got to the point where I would put a brand new axle in the car and I could go to the track and break it. It was just, they were Mazda speed axles. They're the strongest ones Mazda put in the car, but I was running drag radials and beating the crap out of it, and you could twist them off. So then I got to the point where I said, well, I can't drive the car the way I want to drive it or it'll break, and that's no fun. To me, that's no fun. Some people are fine with that, but that's not my style. I'm not good at mechanical empathy. I'm very bad at that. I have no self-control. When I go to the track, I turn the boost all the way up. I launch the hell out of it. I'm pretty hard on stuff, so I have to build it to take that. That's how the car is going to be enjoyable. It's actually, anyway, sorry, I won't go on a sidetrack here. But that's going to be the focus of this build. So these pressure sensors, just to give you some insight into this. So these are Honeywell name brand sensors. They're heavy duty. These are industrial grade, blah, blah, blah. Here's some descriptions. You can use these for stuff like engine oil, petroleum-based hydraulic fluids, brake fluid, air, ammonia, corrosive media. So you can see these are designed for, harsh stuff. That's what we're looking for. Also, these are rated to 125C. I don't see where that's at in this sheet. But anyway, somewhere on here it says they're rated to 125C. And that's, there it is. Operating and compensated temperature range. So this sensor can run to 120 from negative 40 to 125C accurately. So the total error band is plus or minus 2% full scale. So that means I can run this from this temperature all the way to that temperature, and whatever it tells me is within 2%. So this gauge is 100 psi. Well, this is just a generic data sheet, but I'll use this for, say, fuel pressure. So, 100 psi, I'll be within 2 psi of accurate across that entire range always. And in practice, these things are usually way better than the data sheet, but that's a guarantee over that huge range. And that's kind of what we're looking for on this build. We really want something that we don't have to worry about it. So that's these sensors. Now they're rated to 125C. So you're probably thinking, well, that's great. You won't have problems. My eBay sensors failed. These probably won't. Well, that's probably true. But here's the thing. I'm not going to stick these in the engine bay underneath the motor, buried where they get hot. So what we're going to do is we're going to remote mount these sensors. So say the oil pressure. Instead of just screwing it in the block, so if you screw this in the block, it's going to be vibrating and shaking, and it's going to be exposed to hot oil. So we're not about that. So we're going to put an AN fitting and a hose, and we're going to run that hose probably, at a high quality hose. No, we're not going to skimp on anything. But we're going to run that hose 2 or 3 feet away, probably to like the fender well, not the engine bay side, but the outside side, or the front bumper or something, or under the car where it's got airflow. Somewhere where that sensor will never see maybe 150 Fahrenheit, whatever that is in C, I don't know. But 125C is hot. So we're never going to get there. We're probably never going to go above like 60 or 70 C on this sensor. And we're going to do that on purpose. All we got to do is buy a couple of fittings and a really high quality hose, route it, safely. And we'll put the sensor somewhere where it can live without vibration and without the high temperature. And it's not really going to cost us much. It's going to cost us a couple fittings. That might cost $20, and a nice hose might cost $30. And we would have had to buy at least one fitting to install it anyway. So basically for the cost of $30 to $40, we're going to remote mount the sensor, and we're going to basically take it out of the harsh environment. So you can see this is like a twofold approach. We're gonna have a high quality sensor that's capable of, it's probably capable of running in that harsh environment, and yet we're gonna remote mount it so that we can get rid of the vibration and we can get rid of the heat. And by taking that twofold approach, this sensor will likely last, functionally forever. It'll probably be on the car 10 years from now and still be working fine. So that type of thinking is how we're going to be approaching almost everything we do on this build. At least anything that is consequential, because we want this thing to be able to beat on it and not have to worry about it. And for me, these sensors in particular, I'm going to be monitoring oil pressure. So if I make a pass and at the very end of the pass I see the oil pressure dip, I don't want that to be that the oil got so hot that that it got so hot that the temperature caused the sensor to report a bad value. Because if that happens, I might think, oh dear, I lost oil pressure at the last half a second at the track or something. I need to tear my engine down and check the bearings. Or, oh my God, what's wrong with my motor? I need to tear it down and start, trying to diagnose what's going on. You don't want to be chasing stuff like that, especially a problem that doesn't exist. Or, you don't want to miss a problem if it's happening. So I need to trust these instruments, and that's why we're going to go to these type of efforts, is to make sure that since we have a goal and we know what it is, we want to make sure our actions are going to lead us to achieve that. So we'll do some detailed on some other stuff, but I thought these pressure sensors was a good little story to kind of illustrate the type of thinking and how we're going to go about this build. So anyway, that's it for now. You guys take it easy.